Hello, and welcome to the Six Figure Developer Podcast, a podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Nash.
With us today is Jennifer Wadella. Jennifer is a software engineer who has been writing code since before she realized it was a credible career path. She currently works as a JavaScript developer at Bitofi and is a Google developer expert. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Jennifer, before we kind of dig into the meat of things, would you just give our audience like an introduction to yourself? Maybe like tell them how you got started in the industry?
For sure. So when I was in high school, since before high school, was very much interested in computers, but computer science wasn't really talked about as a career path, definitely not programming. I wanted to be a graphic designer. I got really excited after we had some dudes from Hallmark who used to do like flash animation e-cards, as I date myself. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And so I wanted to do something around computers and graphics. So went to school for graphic design, did a little coding here and there because like MySpace days, that's what you did when you were bored. And needed to add a little angst to your blog as you could do all sorts of JavaScript tags embedding. And you know how that went. So graduated with degrees from Drake University in graphic design and business management, but I graduated in 2009, which meant the economy was shit because I'm a millennial. And we will never, ever advance because the universe keeps falling on us. Oh, God. Okay. This is why I drink. So anyway, I wasn't able to really land a lot of work, but I could freelance and love designing websites, but people were really only interested in hiring me if I could build the websites too. And so that kind of led me more into web development. And then eventually started when the economy picked back up, got a job at a huge marketing agency where I really started to grow and develop as a web developer and a JavaScript developer, and really just kind of took off from there. And then when my career really kind of started to take off, I wanted to first find a way to give back to the community around me because I think that's really important. But also I was kind of noticing a trend where I tended to be the only woman in the room. And so that led to me founding Kansas City Women in Technology, which is a nonprofit trying to grow the number of women in tech careers in Kansas City. We've been around for 7 years now. And so we do everything from running networking events where we talk about technology topics to actually running coding classes. Probably our most successful program to date is called Coding and Cocktails, where we teach women web development. We talk a lot about command line. We talk about version control, all sorts of fun stuff there. And yeah, that's kind of been my trajectory. I do a lot of speaking when the world isn't on fire. And yeah, that's my TLDR-ish.
That's cool. So these days, what do you primarily work with? What's a sort of a typical day for you today?
Oh, that's a depressing question. No,
I'm sorry.
Actually, no, you're fine. So I consider myself like a JavaScript developer. I don't discriminate. Just please don't make me write PHP. And not hating on it. It's just
I agree.
Yeah. But I've done most work lately in Angular, and I think Kansas City tends to be a pretty .NET heavy town, and a lot of times Angular gets paired with that. And so I actually lead Angular consulting at the company I work for, Bitofi. So it's boutique JavaScript consulting. We do everything, but I lead our Angular team and working on projects. So my day-to-day is anything from, biz dev calls with people like coming to us saying, hey, can you help us with this? Working through Angular upgrades. We have a lot of people coming to us needing to help upgrading from AngularJS to Angular. We do a lot of training too, because if you know anything about the Angular ecosystem, the newest version of Angular is built on top of TypeScript and RxJS, on top of being a completely rewritten framework. And so that's a lot of knowledge that teams need to comprehend before they can actually start being productive. So doing a lot of trainings on that. And speaking at conferences too, getting our brand out there and showing people what we can do. So
that's really cool.
And before we hit record, we were discussing kind of your roles and your work within the community and work within JavaScript and the fact that Clayton is also these days primarily an Angular developer and but that you're not particularly zealot towards any particular framework.
Yeah, I mean, like, come on, it's JavaScript, y'all. We're gonna like build it up and then burn it down the next day, and then argue about the latest and greatest thing. Like, I give a shit about writing code that users care about. I care about having fun while I write code, and making a product that's gonna be great for people. So, yep.
Do you think we've moved past the my JavaScript framework can beat up your JavaScript framework, or?
I think we're definitely getting there. I feel like we're being a lot more conscious. Like, obviously, I made a joke about PHP, but I think we're getting a lot more conscious about like language shaming or not thinking that one language is better than another. And I think the same goes for frameworks. And I think a lot of that is just if we've seen diversity in the tech community. I think it's brought in different ideas and different concepts, and some of that ties into, hey, your experience might be different than mine. Doesn't mean it's better. Doesn't mean it's worse. And I think that is starting to kind of seep into the way we behave towards frameworks. Although I'm not going to lie, when I tell people I do Angular, they're like, ew, why would you ever do that? And I'm like, all right, sweetie, let's slow it down. And like, especially with the kind of work I do in consulting, a lot of what I see are full stack teams that need a solution. And a lot of times, especially with .NET engineers, they want a solution that's not scary. And like React or Vue are brilliant, but those are definitely frameworks that are built for people who've been running around in JavaScript land building single page applications for the last 10 years. And so there are a lot of times when a framework like Angular provides more structure that a team needs because they're too busy juggling a million other balls. And so like, let's look at the context, let's look at the skill set of the team and make decisions on our frameworks based on that.
I love another thing you said, where you said that users don't care about your stack, and I think sort of what you're getting to there is like you're really trying to dig to the heart of what actually matters.
Mm-hmm. And I mean that's a big thing at my company, Batobi. I don't know if you'd quite call it a core value, but it's very much a part of our company culture that we're not just code writing bitch monkeys. Like, we're thoughtful. And if we, get some sort of feature, get some sort of user story, we want to know, okay, how is this impacting the user? Have we done user testing? How do we know that this is what they're looking for? And we very much have this approach of, we're not here to turn out code. We're here to build a product, build something that's going to be good for people to use. And so I think if you maybe shift a little bit of that mental energy that you're harping on about your favorite framework towards, okay, well, is this special thing like that I want to use actually going to benefit the user? Like, am I spending enough brain power thinking about that? So I think that's something that we could all do a little more balancing and focusing around.
Developers tend to focus on. They certainly tend to focus on the tech side of things. Oh, it's a SPA framework, or this supports PWAs, or it's using WebAssembly, or oh, well, we need types in our JavaScript and all that other stuff. So I totally get that. In my experience, though, I've also had not only kind of working that angle with the developers, but some of the business analysts that are close to the developers. They also kind of get tied up in the framework because they hear the developers talking about it all the time, and when I'm getting requirements, I often find it difficult to get them to focus on what the user actually needs, and not that we're making a component or something like that. Have you seen that kind of thing going on as well, or what's your experience with the rest of the business when you're talking about forgetting about the stack and worrying about what the user needs?
Well, I think that's definitely responsibility we can take on as developers, is like, stop making the product or the requirements fit to the way you develop. Like, that defeats the purpose of whatever you're using if you can't build what the user needs. So kind of like keeping them out of that conversation is key. I'm really lucky. I've been working on this like really awesome client lately, and they have the most beautiful requirements I have ever seen. Like, I'm talking like you can wire everything up. We're using NGRX, which I know people either love or hate, but like, so it's very closely tied to the business logic. Like, it's so good that I can literally copy paste from the requirements in Jira into my unit tests. It's just like, oh, it's so stuff like that. I get way too excited about shit like that, right? Like, it makes it really easy and really enjoyable to write code because I'm not like getting hounded by bugs of weird like cases or scenarios that haven't been thought through. Right. It's just like very well written, and so I can write better code around it, and so that's fun.
I need to meet these people. I have never seen what I would call good requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get to the point that you get good requirements? Is that just a long drawn out conversation with the clients and the people involved, or is it being in the room and helping pull out the necessary requirements from them and
Yeah.
assemble them, or how do you get to that point?
Well, so I love that phrase pull out because like I think good requirements are always going to start with the user and user testing and understanding what the user really wants. And like we've all seen that diagram, right? Like what the client asked for, what the project manager asked for, like what the product owner described, what the engineer built, right? And that's really common. And so getting good at asking questions, not around like what they want, but what they're trying to do, because they might be like, oh, well, I want this border to be red. Do you want the border to be red, or do you want to draw more attention to something on this page? And so by focusing on solving problems versus implementing solutions, you can steer conversations in a better way where it doesn't get obfuscated by what they think they want versus what's going to actually deliver value. So having a lot of conversations about that. But, I think I've worked with maybe like two, three like business analysts or like project managers that were just like so good that like they're worth their weight in gold. Like I know we think we're hot fucking shit as developers, right? But have you ever worked with like a really good project manager? That shit is fire. So yeah, it is a skill for sure.
I've got 4 children. I would sell one if I could work with a good a good project manager or BA.
All right, really important question though. Like, how many iterations of Baby Shark are you into right now while you make that comment? Or are your kids older than that?
I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. The other two are way older than that, but the 5-year-old knows Baby Shark. The 3-year-old, he's oblivious right now. Keep it that way.
So you just got one more iteration to go.
Yeah, maybe. Well, it'll be something else by then. You know how the internet works. It'll be right now in between the shows that he's watching World on PBS or whatever. They build things out of words, and then the things turn into real things in the world. It's weird, but the commercials that they show aren't commercials. It's wash your hands, do.
That's amazing. Actually, my random thing I want to do is I want to build an Alexa skill that's like, hey, Alexa, play me a hand washing song. And then it'll play a random song that's the length of the time you should be washing your hands.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Yeah.
I'll get drunk some night and I'll end up doing that.
All right. So we know that Clayton hates most technology or at least has an opinion on most of it. And also hasn't always had the best experience on getting requirements and working with business folks and try to get to an understanding place. You had mentioned also before we started recording that one of the key aspects is that you want to consider the users in those requirements in building up of applications and in asking what the benefit to the user is. Are there other key nuggets like that or takeaways or skills that we can adapt and work on ourselves to get better at conditioning ourselves to asking those questions of what is the benefit of this feature? How do we get to the ultimate goal of what it is they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like especially if you're in a place where you don't have good requirements or you're kind of having to make shit up as you code, you get in this mindset of how would I use the application or how would I do. Mm-hmm. And for us, we're pretty technologically advanced people. Like you talk about the quarantine, and my mom's like, "Do you have a Zoom account?" I'm like, "Yeah." Or like my little sister is like losing her mind versus I'm just getting drunk and playing video games with my friends like I normally do. Like we live in a different normal subset, right? And so you kind of have this tunnel vision of the way you think everybody focuses, and that's not true. And so I think the best thing you can do, and one of the easiest things you can do is kind of start to give yourself that kind of content organically. So a lot of us are on Twitter all the time, and it's kind of that thing that you flip open and you mindlessly scroll through. But if you look at your Twitter feed and you stop following like all just like your framework zealots or like, oh, just liking everything that Corey House tweets, and start to follow like UX developers or people who are doing user testing, or follow some thought leaders in that area, that might expand your horizons. You'll kind of be like, oh, that's a good point. Okay, maybe I should consider this. Hey, maybe we should go, and before we get all excited about this new feature in sprint planning, let's go talk to a couple users first. Let's do some sort of group study. And just kind of look for other people to follow, or other, thought leaders that can help you maybe a bit more organically expand your mindset.
Yeah, I think another thing that we're kind of talking about is when I'm busy thinking about how I might use it, I'm also thinking about the problems that I might have and my perspective of it. But that is not necessarily the same thing that the user, like, this is my like we talked about having bad requirements. If I don't have a good picture of what their problem is, or where their mindset and where they're coming from, then me putting myself in those shoes is a bad picture anyways. And so sometimes we get confident in looking at what we're doing and saying, well, this is going to be useful, and I can see why this would be useful to me. But we're solving we're solving the wrong problem in the first place, because we haven't really put ourselves in their shoes anyway.
Yeah. And there's nothing more depressing than writing some really great code and then having to throw it away.
Yeah, and along those lines, another thing that really hit me when we were talking a little bit before we hit code, one of the big things that we even talk about is clean code, and just kind of the point that you were making of like, you can refactor something, and that might be like some awesome stuff, but if that's not bringing value to the user, you might have just wasted your time there. And so, yeah, I find that may be something I have to like really check myself and start looking and making sure that is this where's the value that I'm bringing to this refactor, and there might be reasons to refactor code that for sure, like we talked about, like maintainability, and we know that the users are going to want to add features to this, and we want to be able to add this later on, so that might be a good value add there, but that the user sort of sees indirectly. But really understanding and getting that user perspective, I think is so important.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the other things that reminded me of, like, I don't know if y'all have done this before, but like I've been on projects where you have that person and they're that person that just has to have their thumbprint on everything, right? And so they'll ask you to do something and you're like, no, this is what they're asking me for, but I know it's not going to do what they want to do, and they're going to want it the way I had before. So I would literally just comment out the code that I know we're going to revert back to, write the bullshit they're asking for, and 9 times out of 10 they hate it, and I just put my comment in code back. Like, has anybody else done that before? Like, it's just like the sixth sense, it's going to go down that way. You don't even bother to deal with version control. You just leave it in the comments and you're like, oh, they're going to hate this. Yep.
Yeah.
And we drink.
I usually just pick a fight with the business and then have to go have a hug it out meeting. Doesn't end well for me.
Yeah, but that's like a big part of what we need to do too, is like, okay, when you get into this mindset of thinking about the value to the user, then you need to get used to being able to advocate for why or why not something should be done. And then part of that is picking and choosing your battles. Like if there are 6 things and you might have to rank priority, you're going to take some hits, but see if you can advocate for the things that really matter. So yes.
Yeah, Clayton, pick and choose your battles. You don't have to fight all of them.
I tend to go overboard, and you know this.
Well, sorry, I'm having like this vision of Braveheart at like the end fight scene when they're like, ah!
I have a tendency to dive headfirst into most everything that I do. Like, I want to build a car, so I've learned to melt and cast aluminum.
That's the appropriate response.
I do the same thing at work when it comes to the code and the user stories and everything. And yeah, I've made a few people upset.
Well played. Well played.
But you have also like set your own personal boundaries and said, you won't work exponential hours over just in order to produce something that may or may not benefit someone somewhere down the road, right?
Yeah, and that has made some people upset when I don't answer the phone at 2 a.m. because I'm not on the clock at 2 a.m.
Boundaries do make people upset because they can't get what they want all the time. But I mean, that's how you teach 3-year-olds, right? Sometimes we have to teach business people that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have
Go
to
to
teach
your
other
room.
developers that way.
Yeah, and I think especially with all of us working remotely these days that may or may not have been working remotely before, there is a certain amount that we need to set our boundaries and say these are the expectations I have. These are the expectations that I understand you have of me. Let's work towards a common goal. Let's understand that we're all in this together, but and that we still have to. I still have to meet the commitments that I've made, and you have to have some understanding that I have personal time and the like, right?
hmm And just because you're at your house does not mean you're available to work. You do not owe your employer every second that you're at home. Like, I saw a tweet where somebody was apologizing for taking a lunch break, even though they were just sitting by themselves and not working or not dealing with their kids. And it's like, oh my gosh, like this is why boundary setting matters. And employers need to respect it, and people need to get good at setting their own boundaries because, I'm sure we've all had really shitty leaders before and really shitty bosses. And so you're going to set yourself at a much better position as an employee if you get good at enforcing boundaries respectfully and learning how to have those conversations. Because, yeah, you do have to teach people because if like it's all about money at the end of the day, if they can keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you, they're going to. So, stand up for yourself, be clear, be transparent, be communicative, but you don't have to be, working every weekend because somebody made some bullshit promise.
Yeah, the way that I've always looked at that is that it's my responsibility to set professional boundaries and not let them push me to the point of burnout or just quitting. But from the business's standpoint, it is your program manager or maybe your manager. It's their job to get as much work as possible out of you. So you could be putting in 120 hours a week. They're going to ask for more. So you're not making them happy by putting in 45, 50, 60, 80 hours a week. So just stop, set the boundary, let them know how much work is reasonable to get done.
Yep.
And just leave it there.
I feel like, sorry, I was cutting you off.
I was just, developers, when I tell them that, they look at me like I'm crazy. Like it just does not compute. But
yeah, but I mean, a lot, like we can sit here all day and be like, oh, just set boundaries, it'll be fine. And that's much easier said than done. So like there are actually some really good strategies that you can use. So I'm sure everybody can relate to the scenario where, they have a mountain of work on their plate. There's been some sort of production issue. And then all of a sudden the business has made this new request for this new requirement. And like people get really frazzled. They're like, how do I say no to this without sounding like an asshole? And so like one of my really easy strategies for this that a lot that gets talked about a lot is when something like that happens, you go back to the person requesting and you say, hey, this is what I have on my plate right now that I can feasibly do. Which of these would you like me to deprioritize for me to do your task instead? Or do we need to go talk to, the business leader or the stakeholder here and find out from them which thing needs to be deprioritized? Because a lot of times these requests coming at you, people aren't thinking about what it takes. Like, let's be honest. A lot of times people who don't understand code think that we press a fucking easy button on our desk and the internet happens. Like that is their understanding. And so we need to be good about communicating the time and energy and effort. And not only that, but helping them weigh the cost of this is going to take this much time to do. This is going to take this much time out of my schedule to deal with this issue. And so learning to advocate and have those conversations is a really, really good tool to have in your belt. And I don't know if you have any little tips like that, Clayton.
I'm not good with people, so.
I spat out my wine.
No, the closest that I've gotten is the business puts tight, like where I work, the business puts really tight deadlines on things, but they're not real deadlines. They're fake. They're just there to try to get the work done faster. So what I have told the developers that work with me is that we can go to the business and we can tell them responsibly, like professionally, we can tell them we don't think that this work is going to get done by the deadline that you've set. We're working as hard as we can. We're putting in all the effort that we can, but we still don't think that it's going to get done, and we think that you should push the date back. If the business says no, then you just go, okay, well, we will continue to work on it as hard as we can and do our, put in our best effort. But, I've let you know that that's what I think. And work your 40 hours or whatever and be done. And if you don't get it done on time, you told the business it probably wasn't going to get done on time. There's no reason to work Saturday and Sunday to try and get that done. That's the closest I've gotten. But in my personal interactions, I've done a terrible job. So,
and believe it or not, Clayton has actually been a really positive influence on me. And I used to work more hours than I should have. And he and I have worked together a number of times, and he helped me realize that putting in extra hours above and beyond isn't sustainable, isn't necessarily the most professional choice to make. If there's a need, if there's, the business will fail if we don't reach this deadline, then I'm happy to jump in. If I caused a delay or if I caused an error, I'm happy to go and above and beyond to make sure that is resolved. One of the biggest one of the biggest ideas that was given to me that really hit home as to why we shouldn't just fill 40 hours worth of work per developer per week, that you don't have any time for innovation left over. And luckily I've worked with a number of good companies, good organizations, and good clients that they realize the benefit of innovation as well as just completing feature X. They want to make sure that, yes, we can complete feature X. And in doing that, we've realized that we can do these other neat, cool things. We can do this other stuff that might save you money, might realize some revenue that maybe you weren't going to realize. There are all sorts of reasons that we want to look into innovation as well as just fulfilling the feature requests that have come in.
Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, as developers, part of the work that we're doing is not just sort of typing or filling out or completing something that's a known. It needs to get done, right? Part of it is problem solving. Part of it is really creative, generative ideas, and that's the biggest portion, oftentimes. And to get code really good and the solution to be done well, that's really needed a ton. And you don't have time if you're busy, if you've exhausted yourself and you don't have time to recuperate and let your sort of mind come back. You can easily sort of wear yourself out, and you'll be putting in the time, but you won't be really moving forward. You won't be able to think as clearly. And so even those boundaries can make you even more productive. I think that's one thing that people don't really understand is appropriate sort of allowing that time for you to kind of rebound and recuperate and recover, right? Gives you the ability to work your most effective self all of the other times. In addition to sort of time, are there any other boundaries that you can think of that you might find to be very successful for you to set?
Yeah, so there are a lot of strategies that you can kind of implement. One is learning to own your calendar. So if you work at a company that has a tendency to just slam meetings on you, you can actually start to kind of block off work time for yourself. And actually just have that set on your calendar. And it's amazing how people actually will not schedule on top of meetings that you already have. And so it's okay to kind of push back on that and say, hey, I really need this time to focus. So that's a really good strategy. being very communicative, especially in remote environments. I know this is really hard for people who've never worked remote before. You lack that kind of really organic conversation that happens inside of an office. So the more you can very transparently communicate, hey, this is my progress on X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm struggling with. This is a problem that I've run into, kind of like you would do in stand-up, only like, a little bit more verbosely, and really just communicate around that will kind of help people be aware of what's going on in your workload. You're not just in your corner doing like magic and hitting buttons, right? So that can definitely help with boundaries. And then, I mean, it depends on where you are. Like if you're at a company that doesn't do sprint planning and it's just kind of like flying by the seat of the pants, the more you can insert yourself into that process, advocate for the amount of time that things would take, and, starting to fight that fight of, oh, I know the sales team has asked for this. Is this really going to benefit for our user? Is this just this one weird client edge case and they're trying to meet numbers, and like getting more of that high level understanding of the impact on the business and the user. You can speak to people easier versus just being, oh, I write code. Oh.
Yeah. I see you talk Clayton well. So.
Yeah, and we're recording this on the 143rd day of April, and we're all kind of stuck at home. So, how are you taking care of yourself, or how have you interacted with others about the positive ways that we're trying to make it through the days?
I'm a hot fucking mess, y'all. So like I worked remote before, so that's not a big adjustment for me. But it sucks because I'm separated from my partner. He's in Germany, and so we can't be together. So that part of it sucks. Conferences have, completely gone. So I had a lot of these things that I was like really looking forward to that kind of helped me like benchmark my months where the days didn't just slide in the next ones. So I've been really trying to be better about making sure that I'm getting my workouts in. Like normally when I go to the gym, it's fine, but it's a little bit harder to do at home because that shit doesn't hit different. Today I blew off my workout and made gooey butter cake instead. Nice. Quarantine 15, here I come. But I think, I don't know, it's a hard situation and everybody's going to deal with it differently. But I think the best thing you can do is be really, really introspective about yourself. If you're finding yourself being snappy with your family, snappy with coworkers, think about what is triggering you, figure out little things you can do in your routine to make you happy. And this is something that I'm really struggling with too, because like all my normal things that make me happy aren't working. I'm very good at like seeing a problem and figuring out a way to solve it and like moving forward. But you can't do that when this quarantine doesn't have a deadline and we're like in this limbo where it's like, you don't want to invest a lot of effort into something if it's not going to matter 2 months from now. But what if we're still here 6 months? I don't know. Hot mess. And I'm playing a lot of Animal Crossing, y'all. So much fucking Animal Crossing.
See, I'm making a plague doctor mask out of leather.
Classy. I've seen a couple of those. Oh my gosh, have you guys seen the dick face mask?
No.
No.
Okay, so this has been making the rounds that I've seen it on social media, but I originally saw this woman posting about it, but I think they might be selling it somewhere. But you know how like you can get printed fabric and it has like a really small print? Well, she found this fabric and it's got these little penises all over it. And so she's telling people, if you're close enough to see my mask has penises on it, you're too close to me. So good. It's so good. I know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's another thing is like find the little joyous moments of shit people are doing in the quarantine. If you don't know where to look, start on TikTok.
All right. So aside from TikTok, what other resources might you point people to? Maybe we were talking about sort of broadening your horizons. You mentioned sort of following some UX Twitter folks. Do you have any that you might be able to call out? Or anything else for like helping people set their boundaries or sort of whatnot?
I don't have a list of those people off the top of my head that I can give you. But as far as setting boundaries, I do have a couple blog posts at betobi.com that we can link in show notes that talk about working remote. One is written from a manager perspective and what managers need to be doing to make sure their teams are effective. And one is for a remote worker. And so some of that is somewhat boundary related in a remote sense, meaning like you need to be getting up to leave your desk. You need to communicate with family members and have very clear patterns of this is work time. Pretend I'm not here. Because setting boundaries with your family is really important to do too. And so just some various strategies that are available in there. And then just random book recommendations. I really like 2 books when it comes to all things business, interacting with others, code, leadership, and one would be Radical Candor, and the other one would be Thanks for the Feedback. So those are 2 that I always like to recommend when we're talking about any sort of topics that are good reads. And then if you need like a good get you out of this funk book, I really like Without Their Permission by Alexis Ohanian. He's co-founder of Reddit. And so if you just need a good, like inspirational, like feel good book, it's not super, super thick, but I like that one a lot too. So
Nice.
yeah.
All right. Now, one of the things we ask pretty much all the guests who come on is if they would give some specific feedback to our listeners who maybe are just getting started or trying to get a leg up in the industry. So do you have any advice or words of wisdom that you would kind of speak directly to them?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, stop comparing yourself to all the thought leaders that you see on social media, because that can be a really frustrating mindset to get in, that you'll never be as good or as smart as this person. The other thing is to be aware of having a fixed versus a growth mindset. And I like to bring this up because I feel like it's something that a lot of people in our line of work tend to fall prey to. A lot of us were pretty good in school. We got a lot of concepts pretty quickly, didn't really have to apply ourselves, got pissed off by homework because we were like, why the fuck am I doing this? This is a waste of my time. I already understand. Right? You're laughing because it's true.
Absolutely.
It's like you were there with me.
So what happens with that is you're very smart and you get praised for being smart and you get praised for being intelligent and you get stuff right away. And if this happens for long enough, like I know it did for me, it wasn't until I was in college that I really got challenged by something. And I had this very fixed mindset where I was flunking macroeconomics and I was just too dumb for econ. I was too dumb to be in college. I was not smart enough to be there because I had never been challenged in my life. I did not understand that my intelligence or my knowledge was something that could change. I had a fixed mindset. This is just how smart I am. And so if you can get out of that mindset and understand that, no, if you keep applying yourself and keep trying to figure it out, you will get there. So that's having a growth mindset, is understanding that you can continue to grow, you can continue to get better. You're going to have these aha moments over and over again. Like in JavaScript, I remember how hard it was to understand the concept of this. And it was so hard. I'm too dumb. I'm never going to figure this out. Oh my gosh, I'm a fucking moron. I shouldn't be writing code. And granted, this is like the wild, wild west days where I was like having to learn like in the browser. There wasn't like Code Academy or like boot camps or anything. It was the school of hard knocks and Googling shit. But still, like having that mindset of if you keep trying and figuring out, you're going to get there. And it's going to be that same thing over and over and over again in your career. You're going to continue to learn. You're going to continue to grow. Just keep pushing yourself. You're not smart enough to not be able to do this.
That's awesome advice. How about if our listeners wanted to follow you or sort of reach out to you, is there a social media or a platform for them to do that with?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at like OMG it's Fetty. And if you tune in shortly, my bitch ass is getting drunk and live tweeting Listen to Your Heart, which is a new Bachelor knockoff. It's going to be a disaster. Yeah. And I blog at jenniferwadella.com and sometimes dev too. But mostly, yeah, just get drunk and tweet reality TV. And yeah.
Nice.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Really appreciate you coming on the show, speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Jennifer Wadella. Jennifer is a software engineer who has been writing code since before she realized it was a credible career path. She currently works as a JavaScript developer at Bitovi and as a Google developer expert.
If you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
And be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I am John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.